Okay, first of all, if you're not familiar with aeration, what it is it's adding oxygen or fresh air to the water, and it's done by piping it underwater and letting it out in diffusers. In the ocean, this would be done with a much larger equipment, very large compressors, and would cover a large area. Now, the benefits of this are that it adds oxygen, which every living creature in the sea requires oxygen. And the way that they get that oxygen is through their gills, right here. And they bring the water in through their mouth, it goes through the gills and goes out. And as it goes out, it contains CO2, just as it does in sharks and manta rays. These are the gills. They draw the water in. CO2 comes out. Clams, shellfish, they draw the water in, goes through the gills, and as you can see here, it's gills, and goes out with some amount of CO2 in it. And this is true of lobsters as well. They have gills. Essentially every creature has these. So aeration would add oxygen back into the water, which anyone who's raising these creatures in captivity, they aerate the water in order to maintain the health of the creatures. Now, in the ocean, there is a barrier. This is why if we overcome this in the polar regions, which aeration will do, this fog actually creates a thermal barrier. If you were on the bridge, let's say up on the bridge, it's say 10 degrees below zero. Down in the fog here, it would be considerably warmer, maybe 10 degrees warmer or more. And then, of course, the water is going to be even warmer than that, which is why it's creating fog. So aeration overcomes that by pumping this colder air up here directly down into the water and releasing it there. Now, in the Arctic and in the Antarctic and in the oceans there close to the ice, if this was employed there, or I should say deployed, it would actually be letting air out that might be, say, minus 30 degrees into water that's just slightly above freezing. As these bubbles rise, it will chill that water. And if you left it in one area constantly for a while, it would actually form ice on the surface. So done on a wide scale, large enough scale, this would actually begin to expand the ice in both regions. And a $500 million investment, we could put, I figured it out, 22,500 individual aeration systems, much larger than this. They'd be on a scale of probably 1,000 times larger than this. Of course, this is hard to imagine how large this is, but this is something in a large aquarium. And that pricing, that involves compressors. That compressors could run as much as $20,000 a piece, and the aeration would be a simple matter of heavy-duty PVC, which it's easier to drill holes in. You drill tiny holes across them, and then you weight it somehow so that it gets down. Now, as I said, every creature in the sea with gills, sharks, of course, whales would not be included, dolphins, etc., those animals that actually come to the surface to breathe, although they do quite often, they release the air before they come up to the surface, so they are actually inducing some CO2 into the water. But to get the CO2 out of the water, this is a growing problem that scientists are bringing more and more awareness to. In aquaculture, there's a system known as degassing, and what it involves is something very similar to this, where the water is sprayed through the air and the CO2 escapes, as well as nitrogens that might be a result of the fish excrement in the water. It's degassed, it goes into the atmosphere. So yes, we'd be adding some CO2 to the atmosphere, but with all of the projects planting millions and millions of trees, there's a lot of optimism that that would be removed. But doing this would, on a large scale as well, would reduce the extent of ocean acidification that's occurring now, and that acidification is very unhealthy for every species in the ocean. So that would be a huge benefit, and this can actually be done. Of course, you need some source of power for the pumps to do this, as well as the compressors with the others. But there are a lot of ways that that this can be done with minimal addition to heat to the atmosphere, or CO2 to the atmosphere. And I won't go into that right at the moment, but I just wanted to make this quickly here to point out the fact that we do have these two options. By the way, this, with these droplets falling out of this, and even where this finally ends up falling, if it's done through, say, minus 30-degree water or 30-degree air, this is going to be chilled extensively. There would be ice droplets coming through here, and again, they would be dropping through the fog barrier that scientists have determined is something that 30 to 40% of the time through the entire year, this exists in the polar regions, and it is, as I said, a thermal barrier that doesn't allow the cold air to actually hit the water and influence it. So there's no disagreement as to whether we need to expand the ice. This is organic. This doesn't have to be anything launched into space or thrown up into our atmosphere. Nothing that's going to come back down and cause harm to health on the planet. This is perfectly healthy. As I said, the only thing with these is that they will add CO2 to the atmosphere, but there have been millions and millions of trees planted all over the world to help get the CO2 out, and it's a matter of, and we're only talking about affecting maybe 1% of the ocean's water. Probably not, probably more like 0.5% of the ocean waters, to bring the ice at both polar regions back to what they were in, well, 1979 was when we first started having satellites up there looking at it. But we could, within 2 years, if enough money was invested, we may be talking up to $10 million or $10 billion, sorry, of an investment. But once in place, we could cool the oceans, you cool the planet. There's no question about that. So oceanic aeration is something that it's not talked about a lot, but it definitely needs to be, and it needs to be deployed. The evidence that's out there now is that these massive storms that we're seeing coming in off the oceans, and they've been hitting all over Europe, hitting all over the United States, hitting all over Asia, India, cooling the temperatures by a few degrees is going to make a huge difference in how we live here, and whether or not we have to spend our time and massive amounts of our energy and resources rebuilding what these storms do. So, put simply, I think $1 billion invested in aeration to cool the oceans is probably worth about $20 billion in rebuilding after the storms. So it's a worthwhile investment, something we need to be doing, and I hope I've explained it well. I do plan to make a better video in the future, but my time is limited, and that may be a while before that comes about. So if you agree with what is here, be sure to share it, because we really, the efforts that I've spent trying to get governments and different agencies to do this on a large enough scale to prove it. We need a lot more voices reaching these people in order to get this done. So pass it on. Thanks for watching.